But what was kind of like the history of Firesite's tools, like leading up to using Figma? I know that there were a few. There was Adobe XD,
Yeah,
there was Sketch. Like,
yeah,
what was that What did that history look like?
totally. I think the beginning I mean, when I first started at Firesite, we were still working out of Photoshop files. It was very, clunky, but I think that's kind of just what we did back then. It was, just get it done and then run with it. So we were very quick and dirty back then. I think we got kind of invested into Sketch pretty heavily after that, and it was kind of like the next big step in being able to kind of like, standardize the process, get everybody on the same page as far as the best practices for how to design something, so that we could all kind of agree on certain things that needed to be done a certain way. Sketch really let us kind of hone in those things. Being able to work with components and being more strict with the way that things are built out. That also helps the developers because they can kind of break down the design a little bit easier. So working with Sketch for a little while. Adobe XD also came out. We kind of experimented with that for a little bit. We went to an Adobe XD event and got to participate and do a little app showdown where me and another designer built out a concept using Adobe XD, and we actually won the Viewers' Choice Award or the People's Choice Award. So that was cool to get to use Adobe in this new way, because before that Adobe wasn't really in that space for making a screen design software. So that was kind of like the first step for them. And Adobe XD was, it was a lot more simple back then, but there was kind of like some things I didn't like about it, but I mean, it was pretty good. I think later down the line, they started to incorporate some animation stuff, which was really cool, but now Adobe XD just doesn't exist anymore. They pulled the plug on it. So I think that just kind of was the end of it. We saw all these features that were included in Figma that really stood out against what was available with Sketch. I think with Sketch, it was kind of like they have a bunch of these updates, but then nothing's really changing. Figma seemed like they were coming out with new features all the time. One thing for sure was, being able to learn auto layout and just how much time you can save in building out a website by being able to design it more in a way that the website is actually developed, which I think that was kind of missing from Sketch. So a lot of the, being able to work with divs and, arranging things in a column was way easier.
Yeah,
Another thing, oh, sorry, you can go ahead.
No, I was just saying that. I was just agreeing with you that that's been like a big debate between Figma and Sketch, is just like what's the functionality and what's like kind of the upgrade process. And I know that that's one of the big reasons that we've been using Figma, is just like the ability to collaborate and the ability to translate to the developer side of things.
Yeah, passing off design files had never been easier. With Sketch, it was a little bit more of a convoluted process where it's like, okay, you have the Sketch file, it's done. How do you present the Sketch file to the client? You can't really present it with Sketch because that's a design software. So that's one thing that Figma really knocked out of the park, is it's like, we're going to be the design software, but also you can pitch with Figma. So that's like, game changer. Before, you needed to have like a third party app like InVision, so we would design something in Sketch, bring it over to InVision, use the InVision document to present to the client, get the client's feedback in InVision, and then interpret that InVision content, move it back into the Sketch, make another version of the Sketch. So it was always back and forth, uploading, and it was just kind of a nightmare. So being able to have all of that within Figma is a huge benefit, and time saving.
Yeah, and you mentioned the apps that you had to use, or like the third party apps you had to use for Sketch. And I know you don't use a whole lot of plugins for Figma, but what are a few of those plugins you use?
Yeah, Figma is great because there's a huge community of plugin developers that make features that, they work just as well as Figma features. So there's definitely some like flexibility in what it can do with, some of the new stuff that's coming out. A plugin that I use all the time is I think it's a WCAG color contrast checker. So that's basically letting you check your colors against each other for the accessibility standards. So people that have like maybe vision disabilities, you want to make sure that your website is according to the standards. So I mean, you could actually get in trouble for making a website that's not accessible. Unsplash is another huge plugin that I use. It's just so easy to grab some stock photos on a website that you're working on. Maybe you just need a quick image or an icon. There's icon plugins. There's a new plugin that's like not something that I've used, but I see it being used a lot, and it's called Reloom. It's kind of a platform that kind of got really popular with Webflow developers. So they actually released a Figma plugin, and it kind of bridges the gap between designing in Figma and developing in Webflow, which is like a web like code-free based web development software. So you can actually design something in Figma and take it directly to a website, which almost takes all the guesswork out of coding altogether, which is a pretty crazy thing for the technology nowadays. It's just getting easier and easier for people to be able to create without really knowing a lot about code.
Yeah, 100%. Me being a non-coder, I definitely appreciate all the no-code software out there right now.
Same.
You know what I mean? It's a challenge, and that's why people hire out companies like Fyresite. They hire out other like businesses just to manage their website, is because of all the like complexities that happen behind the scenes with all the coding, and there's just like a lot of questions behind it. And I know even working here, I personally struggle to comprehend HTML, CSS, all that stuff. So yeah, working with Figma is great.
Definitely.
We're Webflow too, I know, is a big one. But yeah, you mentioned you say Flutterflow. Is that with the stock image website you said? Or
sorry, you cut out a little bit. I didn't hear what you said there.
What was the stock image plugin you mentioned?
It's called Unsplash.
Unsplash, right?
So it's a website that does stock photography already, but they have a plugin as well for Figma. So you can just type in a search right into Figma and plop the image right in without having to go to the browser or anything. So that anything to kind of prevent you from going back and forth is a huge help for me, because once you get in the zone, last thing you want to do is kind of like jump out of the document and then find your place again. Aside from the plugins is like, the community of Figma. There's a huge marketplace of, tools and resources that you can download for free. Some of them are paid. But like, say that you need an example of a wireframe for an app. You're working on something that you haven't worked on before. You can usually find an example or something that's close in the Figma community, which has been a big lifesaver for me sometimes when I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of getting into that territory where I'm doing something that I haven't done before. Maybe I'm not as comfortable with, but you can kind of see what other people using Figma have done. And it's kind of inspiring, kind of like having all that stuff in one place. You don't even have to leave the Figma app to see that stuff. So that's really cool.